You're stopped at a red and blue at 11:30. License out. Everything in order. Then casual, almost friendly. So, where are you coming from tonight? It sounds like small talk. It isn't. Watch the pen. Because whatever you say next gets written down. And here's the trap most people never see. Answer quickly and you're rehearsed. Pause and you're evasive. Stay quiet and you're uncooperative. Three answers, and the notebook has a box for all three. It feels like a test you can't pass, but you were never required to sit it. In New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland, you must say who you are. And if you're driving, show your licence, where you've been. That's a different question. With a different answer, the law already protects. By the end of this, you'll have one phrase that ends the game without breaking a single rule. The officer's tone stays easy. A second one drifts toward your passenger side, unhurried, having a look. And here's the thing to hold before anyone says another word. There are two completely different questions hiding inside this stop, and the law treats them as opposites. One is, who are you? And when a trigger fires, or when you're the one driving, you must answer that. The other is, where have you been? Where are you going? What have you been up to tonight? And that one, in every eastern state, you can decline. The officer blends them together on purpose so that refusing the second feels exactly like refusing the first. It isn't. But the blur is the whole trick. Understand the ladder you're standing on. A movement answer becomes a timeline. A timeline becomes something to check against your passenger's version. An inconsistency becomes a reason to search a car. They had no reason to search a minute ago. One phrase separates what you owe from what you don't, and I'll hand it to you before the end. And a warning about that notebook. They've got a box for every way you can answer. Talkative, evasive, silent. I'll show you the one move that isn't in the book. Quick word before that. No invented career here. Just plain English Australian law. Checked line by line against the statutes, every section sitting in the description. And let's be straight. Most officers ask these questions because they're trained to, not because they're crooked. That's precisely why you should know where the line sits, because they do. Now the proof. Melbourne, 2012. A young man named Magnus Kaba is a passenger, not the driver, the passenger, in a car pulled over for a routine license check. He's done nothing. He gets out to walk away, as he's entitled to, and the officers demand his name 3 times. Then they arrest him for refusing. It goes all the way to the Supreme Court of Victoria, DPP versus Kaba. Justice Bell rules the random stop itself was lawful, but the questioning that came after was not. Police, he wrote, pressed him well over the line of permissible questioning. Past his identity, the judge said, where he'd been and what he was doing were his private business. Hold that phrase. A court has already named the thing that happens at your window and put it on the wrong side of the law. But before you learn what you can decline, you need the short list of what you truly can't. Because getting that half wrong is an offence all on its own. None of this next part is optional, so take it in full. In New South Wales, if you're the driver, you produce the licence and you give your name and address. That's section 175 of the Road Transport Act, not a request. And if police have a specific trigger, they reasonably suspect you can help investigate a serious offence, Section 11 of LEPRA lets them require your identity, with a fine of around $220 under Section 12 for refusing without a reasonable excuse. Victoria writes it into Section 456AA of the Crimes Act, name and address when the officer holds reasonable grounds. And here's the gift buried in that section. The officer must tell you the grounds. You're allowed to ask, on what basis, officer, and they have to answer. Queensland runs it through sections 40 and 41 of the PPRA, name and address, but only in the prescribed circumstances the Act lists. Hear the hard line early. No clever phrase erases a licence duty. The driver who announces he does not consent to identifying himself hasn't found a loophole. He's bought a second charge. But absent those triggers, and once your identity is given, the list ends there. One number for the scale of it. In 2024, Australian police ran 10.3 million random breath tests. The stop itself is routine machinery. What you volunteer inside it is not. And everything past that short list, every question about your night, is the part they're hoping you'll believe is mandatory too. Where are you coming from? Listen to what it's actually doing. It isn't curiosity. It's a timeline being built in your own voice on a body-worn camera. Just coming from the pub starts a clock ticking on your last drink. My mate's place ties you to an address you might not want tied to you, and every word is admissible because the right to silence, Section 89 of the Evidence Act in New South Wales, protects your right to decline a question. It never protects your right to unsay one you've already answered. There is no taking it back. The wrong response is the overexplainer, the driver who hears silence and fills it. Detail after detail nobody asked for. Each sentence another line in a statement he doesn't know he's giving. The counter is simple, and it's the seam this whole video sits on. You do not have to narrate your evening. Giving your identity is not the same as giving your itinerary, and the law has never fused the two. The timeline you decline to build is a timeline that can't be used to build a case. But there's a second officer at that window for a reason, because your version of the night isn't the only one being written down. Here's the second trick. The officer at the passenger window leans in. Your mate reckons you came from the cross. That right? Two people, two memories, and a manufactured inconsistency that becomes the grounds they didn't have 30 seconds ago. Now here's what almost nobody in that car knows. Your passenger is under no more obligation than you are. In New South Wales, a passenger only has to identify themselves on a real trigger, Section 14 of LEPRA, where the car itself is suspected of use in a serious offence, not for the crime of sitting in your front seat. Remember, Kaba was a passenger, and the demand on him was the exact thing the Supreme Court struck down. The wrong response is the driver who jumps in to correct his mate's account, and in correcting it, confirms a timeline for both of them at once. The counter. Neither of you owes a travelogue, and there is no legal duty anywhere to make your stories match. Silence from one of you cannot become suspicion of the other. That's not a conspiracy, and it's not obstruction. It's two people declining the same optional question. But maybe you're thinking refusing is the safe play. That's the third box in the notebook, and it's the one they're most practiced at filling. So watch the reframe when you decline. Evasive, uncooperative, wouldn't account for his movements. The pen writes your first word now, and it feels like refusing just made everything worse. Here is the law they are hoping you don't know. Refusing to answer on its own cannot be reasonable suspicion. Street versus Bauer settled it. Robust insistence on your rights is not a ground to suspect you of anything. Rondo. The case this channel comes back to sets the bar. Suspicion needs a factual basis, something more than a possibility. And a declined question is not a fact against you. But I'll be honest about the edge, because this channel names its limits. Nervousness plus something real. Bloodshot eyes, the smell of cannabis in the car, That combination can be enough, as a Queensland court found in Swain. Nervousness alone can't. Refusal alone can't. So the box marked evasive is a bluff. It carries no legal weight on its own, unless you hand them a second ingredient to go with it. The counter is to stay calm, stay polite, and decline the optional question in a tone no report can twist into obstruction, which is exactly why the phrase you're about to learn is built the way it is. Every word chosen to close a box. One more thing before the words, because it's the mistake I see most. The video you watched last week was probably American, and copying it here gets you charged. Over there, the script is, I don't have to tell you anything. Total silence, invoke the fifth. Try that at an Australian window, and you've just skipped the one part that actually is compulsory. Identifying yourself and showing your license if you're driving. Refuse that. And it's a real offence. Section 12 in New South Wales, Section 456 AA in Victoria, Section 40 in Queensland. The precise charge the American script walks you straight into. So hear the line clearly in both directions. Identity when it's triggered and your license when you're driving are compelled. Where you have been is not. America fuses the two into one blanket silence. Australia splits them, and that split is your protection. Get it backwards either way. Refuse your own name or narrate your whole night, and you lose. One sentence gives them everything the law demands and nothing it doesn't. Here's what it has to carry. It has to satisfy the compelled half completely. So there's no identifying offence left to charge. It has to decline the voluntary half clearly, so you don't drift into volunteering. And it has to land in a tone no notebook can rewrite as hindering, because hinder is a real offence with real weight. Section 546C in New South Wales, up to 12 months. Section 51(2) in Victoria. Section 790 in Queensland. The wrong response is the lecture. The driver who loudly recites his rights and hands over exactly the demeanour they were fishing for. The counter is the opposite. Warm, brief, final. The pen hovers over the page. And you say it once, even and unhurried. Here are my details, officer. I'd rather not get into where I've been. Again, slower, because the second pass is the one that stays. Here are my details, officer. I'd rather not get into where I've been. Save this screen. Say it once tonight, out loud, so on the night it matters, it arrives as memory and not invention. Now every clause and why it's there. Here are my details, officer. That's the compelled half paid in full. Your name, your address, your license if you're driving. Section 175, Section 11, Section 456 AA. Section 40, all satisfied in 5 words. There is now no identifying offence to write. I'd rather not get into where I've been. That's the voluntary half, declined. No statute in any eastern state compels a movement answer, and Justice Bell drew the line in exactly this spot. Past your identity, your movements are your private business. And the shape of it, officer, I'd rather, is the tone that keeps you clear of Section 546C. It's a soft close, not a stand, a courtesy, not a lecture. Delivery is half the machine. Level, almost warm. No edge for a report to catch and no argument to escalate. The forgettable driver is the free one. And the trained voice across from you has 2 ways to push on that phrase, both already answered. Push 1 is the guilt lever. Why not just tell me? Nothing to hide, is there? You don't reach for it. Same words, same warmth. Here are my details, officer. I'd rather not get into where I've been. Push 2 is the pressure lever. Being difficult's only going to make this take longer for you. It won't. And the phrase doesn't bargain with the threat. Same phrase, same tone. That's your third time hearing it, which means it's muscle now, not memory. And that was always the point. Now picture one clean run, start to finish, and this is illustration, not a case. Red and blue in the mirror, window down. License, thanks. So where have you been tonight? Here you go, officer. I'd rather not get into where I've been. A beat, the pen doesn't move. Nothing to hide, then it's no trouble to tell me. Here are my details, officer. I'd rather not get into where I've been. The license comes back clean. Righto. On your way. Window up, road. Understand what just happened in one line. Nothing there was defiance. It was a driver who gave the law every single thing it asked for and kept the one thing it never required. But there's a fork past this point, and one arm of it is the moment the questions stop being optional. Here's the fork. If the officer names a real ground, I'm requiring your identity under Section 11 because I suspect you can assist an investigation in New South Wales, or the grounds an officer must state under 456 AA in Victoria. Then your identity becomes compellable and you give it in full. You still decline your movements, but you don't fight the identifying because now it's law, not fishing. And if a lawful search begins on genuine grounds or a breath test is put to you, that's a different track entirely. You blow every time. The RBT was never optional, and refusing it is its own serious offence that has nothing to do with the questions about your night. Owner onus is its own separate world too. If a camera catches your car and a nomination notice lands in your letterbox, that form is a legal duty. The roadside phrase doesn't reach it, and ignoring it is its own penalty. And the all states line, plainly, this is New South Wales law, with Victoria and Queensland marked at the borders. But South Australia, Western Australia, Tasmania, the Northern Territory, and the ACT each run their own identity triggers. So check the rule where you actually drive. Two drivers never to become, one line each. The stonewaller, who refuses to give his own name and buys himself a charge that never had to exist. And the narrator, who answers every optional question and builds the case against himself, one helpful sentence at a time. One breath now. The notebook, closed properly. Every one of these lines, what you must answer, what you can decline, what changes at each state border, and the exact words to use. I've gathered into a book called Know Your Rights. Link in the description. Waiting for the night the small talk turns out not to be small. So one breath. Your identity and your license. You give every time without argument. Your movements you keep. And the phrase, once more, unchanged. Here are my details, officer. I'd rather not get into where I've been. Carry the number that reframes the whole stop. New South Wales alone quietly settled $89.62 million across 968 claims of police overreach in just 4 years. The line exists because it gets crossed. This is general information, not legal advice. If a stop goes past a conversation, the video ends and a lawyer begins. Legal aid exists in every state. Subscribe, not for luck, but for the next stop. So the next time, where are you coming from, drifts through your window, it meets a driver who already knows which half of the question to answer. And take the ending you just earned, the notebook closing on a blank page, the license back in your hand, the red and blue shrinking in your mirror, and one street over, another window coming down, another easy question about to be asked. But when they stop asking about your night and start asking for the phone in your pocket, when they tell you to just look at the screen and unlock it, that's a different trap entirely. And it has an $11,000 answer hiding inside it. That video's on your screen now.